I'm here with my assistant, Apple. Apple, hello. To make a very nice holiday treat. We are, as I'm recording this, just a few days away from Thanksgiving, and this is one of my favorite things to have at Thanksgiving. It's not a traditional American dish by any means. It is a traditional Italian dish. They're called Cantuccini di Prato. Cantuccini are biscuits, otherwise known as biscotti, but in the style of Prato, which is a town in Tuscany. And they're almond-flavored biscotti, and they have some other little flavors mixed in. It's actually a pretty simple recipe to make, and I'm not going to make the full recipe because the full recipe makes enough for a whole mess of people, and we just have a few people in the family. Not everybody wants to eat it. So we'll go through it step by step, and Apple will probably try to eat everything before it's cooked, but you can't do that. Maybe I'll give you a little piece when we're done, okay? Good. You know, you're lucky I am not making apple pie because you would be in the oven. You don't want to be in the oven with dough all over you. So we're going to start with flour. I have here about 250 grams of flour, which I'm going to pour onto the board where we're going to do our kneading. We need to have it here, excuse me, thank you. And then I have about 200 grams of sugar that I am going to mix with it. No, you would like the sugar, Apple, but you're sweet enough as you are. I'm going to get those two ingredients mixed together. Into this mixture, I'm going to put some baking soda. Apple, how much baking soda? You need the recipe, you know. This is very important. I'll look. It says about a half teaspoon of baking soda. So I will find my half teaspoon measure. Right there. Baking soda. Not baking powder, that's different. Baking soda. So we put a half teaspoon of that in. And we continue to mix this well. I think if I don't feed Apple any of this flour, she's going to want to leave. You know, there's other Cavaliers to replace you if you leave. By the way, I like to do the kneading by hand, so needless to say, I washed my hands thoroughly before doing this. Clean. I even have my WKRP annual turkey drop shirt on for this. And by the way, if I'm fooling you with these gram measurements, I like to use grams because that's the way I got the recipe when I first was taught by a really wonderful, talented chef named Chef Paolo Monti, and he has a cooking school in Lucca in Tuscany. And my wife and I attended the cooking school for a few days, and this is one of the recipes that we learned. I have tweaked his recipe a little bit because I always like to have bold flavors. But if you're confused by the grams, you know, I like to use the grams. They're more precise. And also, you know, it sounds great to have 200 grams of sugar when you're talking about a sweet dessert. If you did it in ounces, it's like 7. Doesn't sound like much. So I made a mound of this mixture, and in the mound I'm going to make a little well. We need this little well here because we're going to be adding some ingredients to the flour, sugar, and baking soda mixture. You can also add about a half teaspoon of salt if you like. The liquid ingredients that we're going to add into the well include 2 eggs. Remember, this is only 1/4 of the recipe. If you made the full recipe, you'd be using 8 eggs. Oh my God. I once ate eggs, and I like them very much. So I have 2 eggs for the small version of the recipe. So I'm going to add vanilla extract, and I like to put in almond extract and orange extract. It was not in Chef Paolo's original recipe, but I kind of like the boldness of the flavor. So I'm going to use about a half teaspoon of vanilla extract. Excuse me, no. No. Are you following this? Okay, vanilla extract. And about a 1/4 teaspoon each of the almond and orange extracts. Almond gives a little more almond flavor than the almond themselves. Orange, 1/4 teaspoon. We will also be adding some actual orange and lemon rind, so you'll need those handy. When you pick out fruit for the purpose of using the rind, the zest part of it, you have to pay very special attention to the color and the texture of the peel itself. I'm not as concerned with the fruit inside this time as I am with the rind. So use this nice little handy dandy grater. Isn't this great? As you're doing this, make sure that you don't go too deep into the white part of the rind. You just want the orange part of the rind. The part underneath it that's more white is called the pith. And this is not my line, but as Chef Paolo said, we don't want to get too pithy about this. So you want to make sure that you just use the outer part of the rind. So you can see I've gotten about maybe a 1/4 of the orange done. And we do about half of the lemon now. Make sure you don't have any nose clips on or anything while you're doing this, because the scent of this lemon and orange zest is just incredibly good. So you can see that I've gone about halfway around the lemon, taking only the yellow outer part of the rind. I've walked away from being in the picture for just a minute because I wanted everybody to see what a good girl Apple is. All this wonderful flour and sugar in front of her, and she hasn't touched it. You're a good girl. You're sweet without the sugar. So I take the rind that we just did and we put that in with the liquid ingredients. So it's eggs, a couple different extracts, orange and lemon rind, and we beat that together. I'm going to beat it. I don't know why Michael Jackson all of a sudden came to mind, but I'm going to beat it. Once I have beaten it, it goes into the little indentation on the mound of flour and sugar, trying not to let it spill over because we would make a mess. And the only other thing we're going to put into the mixture for the biscotti is almonds. I have here about 125 grams of raw almonds. I like the sliced ones. You could use whole if you want, but I used sliced. And they've been toasted. I put them on a metal baking tray, toasted them in the oven for about 6 minutes at what temperature? What temperature, Apple? 385 degrees. That's Fahrenheit for those of you who live in this backward part of the world where we still use Fahrenheit. I'm not going to add them all at once because it'll make things overflow. So I'm going to add some, and then I will knead the dough together, working from the outside in, starting with a spatula, because it would be a little bit messy to get all that egg on my hands. Add a little bit more of the almonds. And once it starts to come together, I can actually use my hands. I don't need the spatula anymore. There's no water or milk added to this mixture for the dough, and that causes a lot of people to think, but it's way too dry. But it actually comes together if you use, that's why it's very important to measure. If you use the right amounts of each ingredient, it will begin to come together. Right now I'm just kind of pressing it in place, and I will add some more almonds. Now if it seems like there's a lot of almonds in here, remember this is an almond biscuit, an almond Cantucci. Pressing down, molding it into a ball, incorporating all the loose parts, press it down, mold it into a ball. So after about 5 minutes of kneading, I've got myself a nice softball-sized ball. Of course, if you're making the full recipe, you would have several of these or one humongous ball. The Cantuccini is baked in logs, so I need to separate this into logs. The full recipe makes 8 logs, and I'm making 1/4 of the recipe, so quick math. 1/4 of 8 is 2, right, good. Okay, so I'm going to cut this ball into 2 equal pieces, or roughly equal pieces. I'm going to set one of them aside for a minute. And I hope you didn't put the flour away, because we need a little bit more flour. And we make sure that our surface is lined with lots of flour on the surface. And we take this and we knead it together just a bit more. And then we're going to roll this into a log. A log which is, I don't know, like maybe that much in diameter. It should come out to be somewhere around 8 or 10 inches long. That looks pretty good. What do you think? Apple approves, because I saw the tongue coming out there. I have my baking tray here with parchment paper on it. Move over recipe. No, we're not putting it too close to you. And I'm going to put that log on the parchment paper. You can fit up to 4 logs on a single baking tray. I'm going to do the same thing with the other piece of the dough. Apple, there is one more critical step involved before this goes into the oven. No, you are not going into the oven. I'm not doing apple pie. It's okay. You'll probably recall seeing biscotti that have had like a shiny finish to them, and that comes from an egg wash. Very, very simple to do. We take 1 egg, try to crack it nicely in half, and then take 1/2 eggshell, fill it with water, add that, and beat that together. And that becomes our egg wash. Excuse me? Good girl. Apple, are you watching? Watch. That becomes our egg wash that we brush onto these logs before they go into the oven. I try to get the top and the sides. The oven was already set to 385 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know what that is Celsius. So my oven is already at 385. I'm going to put this into the oven for 25 minutes. Alexa, set a timer for 25 minutes.
25 minutes, starting now.
And this is where Apple all of a sudden becomes a real dog and cleans up for me. But you notice she's doing a good job. She's not trying to eat the lemon or anything. She's just sniffing around, trying to get the egg and flour and stuff. I'm going to transfer one log at a time to my cutting board. And this is most easily cut when it's hot. I'm going to cut on the diagonal without a dog up on the countertop. Slices should be about 3/4 of an inch thick. Dogs should not be allowed on the counter. No. One thing I did not mention that I should have is that some people like to sprinkle a little bit of sugar on top of the egg wash. Ooh, crumbs. But the way I'm going to serve these, I don't really need to have them any sweeter than they are. The best part is eating the crumbs. All right, maybe not the best part, but one of the good parts. I stack these pieces loosely on my still hot baking sheet. And I'll do the same thing with the other log. I allow them to sit on that baking sheet until they're cool. So, here is one of our finished Cantuccini biscuits. And before I taste it, let me just tell you the answer to the burning question I'm sure everybody's asking themselves is, what does the word biscotti actually mean? Biscotti literally means twice cooked. I like these the way they are. They're a little soft to the bite. But if you take these already cut biscuits and put them back in the oven for a while, they become the hard, crunchy biscotti that you're accustomed to getting in restaurants and packaged in supermarkets and so on. The advantage of that is that they do last quite a bit longer. So I will probably serve them this way on Thanksgiving in a couple of days. And then after Thanksgiving, I will bake whatever's left over and put them away, and they'll last for at least a few weeks. If you hear any grumbling in the background, by the way, that's Apple. She's getting her dinner. So if she's getting her dinner right now, I get to taste the biscotti. The way I like to serve it is to have a sweet dessert wine. Now, normally, this is served with Vin Santo, which is a traditional Tuscan sweet dessert white wine. It's hard to find in the United States. I actually went to 4 different wine stores this week, and I could not find a good label of Vin Santo. What I found instead is something extremely similar to it. It's a sweet dessert wine that comes from Venice, in a winery that was established about 400 years ago and still operating. So I'm going to pop the cork on this. I don't use a narrow mouth glass because the whole idea is to dip the Cantuccini into the wine. This is served cold. Of course, I have to taste the wine to make sure it's good. Perfect. You could also substitute a good tawny port. Some people say Sauterne. French wine is just as good. I prefer the Italian wines, and this is as good as any Vin Santo that I've had. Get that biscuit dipped in there, and I let it soak for a wee bit. Now, from the start of the recipe to tasting has been slightly less than an hour and a half, so this is not a really difficult recipe. And now the proof. Eat your heart out, Apple. This is good. I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday season. If you are seeing this when it's first published around Thanksgiving, hope you have time to spend with your family and good friends around the table enjoying your meal. And if you are seeing it in April, oh well, wait a few months and you can do it anyway. You can have your pumpkin pie on Thursday. I'm having this. Happy holidays, everybody.